This is the ultimate question. What phone should I buy? Now this is getting old and outdated, yet at the same time, it isn't. This is a OnePlus 5, a phone that is still very capable, but it doesn't come without its shortcomings. Regardless, let's talk about it. Should you buy the OnePlus 5 in 2021? Hello everyone, this is Matt from Real World Review. Check out the social media listed above if you want to talk tech, and subscribe if you want to continue watching tech. Let's get started. This phone marked the end of normal screens, per se. This phone was released about the time that the 16:9 ratio was starting to end, and this phone was the last phone with that 16:9 ratio, with the OnePlus 5T changing that to 18:9. Still, this 5.5-inch 1080p OLED panel just made the phone feel really like it's an iPhone 7 Plus. With the back design and the front design, it's pretty interesting that OnePlus made their phone look like how an iPhone 7 Plus should have looked. And by that, I really just mean that it had an OLED display. Regardless, we get a nice screen size when you compare it to the entire front, with touch buttons on the bottom, as well as a functioning home button fingerprint mix. I'm not really a fan of this, but you can disable these for on-screen buttons if you want to. As for the screen quality, it works. During the day and night, it looks fine, fairly bright at 400 nits. The color looks really nice and accurate, so that was never really an issue for me. The only issue I really had with the screen is the jelly effect that still appears to be here, something that I thought OnePlus fixed years ago. And the screen washes out very easily in sunlight. Other than that, the screen is actually really nice, especially at the used price point. Just remember that this is an OLED display, so used phones might come with screen burn. When it comes to hardware, this phone compares to phones like the Samsung S8 Plus, Google Pixel 2 XL, and the iPhone 7 Plus, and honestly, I think that this is the best of all of those. There are some issues, like the camera is definitely the worst compared to all the others, but in almost every other aspect, this phone is so much better. Starting at the bottom, we have a USB-C 2.0 port with a headset jack and the only loudspeaker, similar to what you get on the Samsung S8 Plus. The processor is the same, being Snapdragon 835 chip, but the OnePlus 5 comes with 6 or 8 GB of RAM depending on your storage size, giving you superior multitasking, which is something that's going to help you out a lot in 2021. This is the smallest battery of those phones at 3,300 milliamps, yet the battery performance is good enough to last you pretty much all day with no worries. This is all thanks to that smaller and not as bright OLED display. There were some downsides, like only having a single loudspeaker, and it wasn't really the best at that either. This phone lacks any type of water resistance and has no memory card slot in favor for a dual SIM tray, but we are given 64 or 128 GB options. Let me remind you, this phone started at $479, while other phones in its class started at $770 or higher, almost double that price. And even at that price, we're talking about a 32 GB iPhone 7 Plus. The OnePlus 5 actually had faster charging as well, at 20-watt dash charging, but the Pixel 2 XL wasn't too far off at 18-watt charging. There are little additions as well, like the LED light as well as a hardware alert slider, a OnePlus staple. The biggest things for me are these two things. One that I'm going to talk about a little bit later, but the other being the overall design of this phone is just so nice. It's an aluminum design on the back, and it's stuck together by clips and 2 screws on the bottom. This phone is actually really slim feeling, to the point where it's super slippery, but also very light at 153 grams, landing in between the 135 gram iPhone 12 mini and the 164 gram iPhone 12. Using heavy phones and devices and then going to something like this is actually somewhat refreshing. You gotta try it. Just like OnePlus did with this phone, I'm not going to focus too much on these cameras. We are given 3 cameras, the front being a 16 megapixel fixed focus sensor, while the rear has dual sensors, one being a wide angle 16 megapixel sensor and the other being a 20 megapixel telephoto lens. None of these sensors offer optical image stabilization, just electronic stabilization. The front is decent, and while it does support HDR, it doesn't really do too well with too much light. The rear sensors look fine, working for most situations, but doesn't really keep up with the other phones in its class, though we are given a lot of features. As for the camera differences, there aren't too much, being different sensors and different focal lengths, but this doesn't entirely mean that these sensors are good. The lower the light, the worse the shot is going to look, and with good lighting, we still are left with an image that isn't as sharp as it should be. As for video, it looks good, but it doesn't seem to be stabilized at 4K video, and yes, this is at 30 frames per second. Overall, the cameras will work for most situations, and they work pretty fast, but don't expect pixel quality. Again, this is something that OnePlus was known for, and the camera wouldn't be a highlight of a OnePlus phone until something like the OnePlus 6T. While using this phone, I realized how special this phone is. Sure, it started out cheap, and there were some corners that were cut on this phone, but I think that's what makes this phone an awesome device. Overall, I feel like this device is so nice and easy to take care of, but at the same time, I'm kind of cheating, but that's a good thing. See, I bought this phone with a broken screen, and the back didn't look so good either. And when we go back to the Pixel, Samsung, and iPhone comparison, this phone becomes one of, if not the easiest phone to not only fix, but also refurbish. I purchased 2 products for $70, and all of a sudden this phone looks brand new. For video purposes, I didn't change the battery, but even that would set me back $80 in total for repairs for ultimately a flawless looking OnePlus 5. And the reason I can do this is because the parts are not only so cheap, but I also don't have to worry about water resistance. Then we move on to the custom software, Oxygen OS, that OnePlus puts into this phone that ultimately gives you pretty much every option you want to ask for, just without the always-on display. But again, this phone is really easy to root and unlock to use with other operating systems, like this Google Pixel-like software that features the always-on display, not to mention Android 11. And that's why I feel like this phone is so special. If you don't mind getting your hands dirty, this phone can actually last you a long time, even now. Something I wouldn't say for phones like the Essential phone. Now, should you buy the OnePlus 5? I would say yes. Examples of these are listed at $100 or less, and even then you can opt for a very similar OnePlus 5T, which gives you pretty much the same phone just with a larger screen, but the fingerprint scanner is on the back. Also, the secondary camera switches the telephoto sensor found in the OnePlus 5 for better low light performance in the OnePlus 5T. Regardless, if you're looking for a cheap, fast, and reliable phone that even the average person can fix, this might be your best bet. And that's my review of the OnePlus 5, also known as the 6. But what do you think? Let me know in the social above, and as always, thanks for watching.